My name is Ayo, and I'm really happy to be here presenting on this topic, Agentic coding with Gemini CLI. So, a little bit about myself. I'm a technical content manager at Azure, where I focus on open telemetry, native observability, and if that just sounds like a bunch of buzzwords, it just basically means that I help software developers, monitor their code in production. That's basically what we do. So if you have like a downtime on your application, we notify you about it and we help you find out what's wrong and how to fix it. So that's what I do at work. But outside of that, I'm also a Google developer expert in the web/browser extensions category, and I've been for some time. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also into open source. I have a couple of open source projects on GitHub, and I've been in the community for a long time. Even before the start of Power Build, when it was still very small. So I'm really excited to see how far it's come so far, and to be participating in it for the first time. All right, so let's get into today's topic, which is building or agentic coding with Gemini CLI. This is a very exciting topic. It's a hot topic in the software world and I think it's quite important, right? Because it's basically the new baseline for how we are expected to build software, right? So getting into tech no longer just means learning to code any longer, right? It's not just about learning how to code. It's also about learning how to use AI tools, right, to help you solve problems faster. So this session is basically going to just be an introduction to agentic coding and just what we mean by agentic coding, and you see some examples in the process. So just to give you a quick overview of what we'll be discussing in this session, we'll start with the Gemini CLI, what it is, right, and why it's useful. And then we'll take a look at how to use it to understand an unfamiliar code base, right? So for example, if you just inherited a project from somebody, or if you are joining a new company, and of course they already have a code base, we'll look at how you can use Gemini to understand that code base very quickly. And after that, I'll be discussing how to edit code with Gemini, how to actually build features, how to fix bugs, how to prompt the agents to solve problems for you at a much faster rate. And I'll also be sharing some practical tips, right, on how to prompt these models to get the best results. And also walk through a few examples as well. So it's going to be a very practical session. So if you have your laptop, I'd encourage you to follow along when we get to that point. So the first thing we need to talk about is what problem does agentic AI actually solve, right? I don't know how many people have actually used an agentic AI like Gemini CLI or Cloud Code. Has anybody used any of those tools here? No one, okay. So, but at least you've used ChatGPT, right? You've used the web, you've gone to your browser, ChatGPT or Gemini, and you've prompted the AI model there. So what those web interfaces cannot do is that they don't have the context of your code, right? So if you go to chatgpt.com or Gemini, right, and you type a message, you have to prompt it, right? But it doesn't have any information about your code, right? So it can help you, but it cannot write the code for you, right? Even if you write some code, you have to copy and paste it from the browser, then you have to find the place in your code, paste it, test it, see if it's working. If it's not working, you have to prompt the AI model again, and so on and so forth. But what agentic AI can do is that it has the full context of your code, right? Because it can read your code, it can help you edit your code, right? It can run your code as well. It can even test your code for you and fix problems. So, if you have automated tests, for example, it's going to run the test for you, right? And if it fails, it's going to read the error message, it's going to figure out why it failed, and it's going to fix the problem for you, at least in most cases. So that's the biggest advantage of agentic AI, is that it has that context, unlike when you're just chatting with, the web model. So what is Gemini? I think, I don't know how many people here have heard about Gemini CLI. Gemini is not the first agentic model that was released. I think the first popular one was Claude Code, and also OpenAI now has their own. I think it's called Codex, and there's many others as well. But Gemini is from Google, right? And it's basically a new kind of AI assistant that lives in your terminal, right? So you don't use Gemini CLI, as the name implies. It's a command line tool. You don't use it through the browser. You don't use it through your editor. You use it from the command line, right? It lives in your command line, and the idea is that it can work with whatever tools you're already working with, right? So, most people, when you're building your code, right, you run scripts from the command line to test the code, to build the code, to deploy the code, and Gemini can have knowledge of all those tools you're already using and also run them for you. And it's general purpose. It's a general purpose tool. While we are only going to be focusing on its use cases for coding, it can do a lot more than just coding, right? You can also do documentation. You can write documentation for you. It can perform any experiments you want to perform. You can ask it questions, and you'll be seeing a lot more of what you can do with Gemini as we go along. And if you want to follow along, all you need to do is run this command on your machine, on your computer. Just open the terminal and run this command, and you'll be able to install the Gemini CLI. So the only thing you need to have is Node.js, right? Because before you can use npm, you need to have Node.js installed. So that's the only thing you need to get started with Gemini. And the good news is that there's a free tier, right? So of course, Gemini has some paid models, paid tiers, but they have a generous free offer, right? When you log in with your Google account, you get access to 60 requests per minute, and I think 1,000 requests per day. So, which is quite generous compared to some other models like Claude Code, for example. I don't think Claude Code has a free tier, for example. You have to pay to use it. But with Gemini, all you just need to do is install the command. Once you install it, you run Gemini on the CLI, and then it's going to prompt you to log in with your Google account. And once you do that, you'll be able to access the AI model in your terminal. And one interesting thing that you should know about, especially if you're a student, is that you can also go to this link and get free access to Gemini, to a subscription for to increase your usage limits, basically. So, I said you can access Gemini for free, but there's some limits to how you can use it. So if you're a student, you can get a pro plan by going to this link, gemini.google/students. And I think this offer is for a limited time. I think it runs through till December. So you have to make sure you go to the link and make sure you grab the offer before it's no longer available. All right, so let me show you what Gemini looks like in the terminal. When you have Gemini installed, all you need to do is run Gemini on the command line like this. And like I said, if you're installing it for the first time, you're just going to see a prompt to log in with your Google account, right? But since I'm already logged in, this is the interface you're going to see on when you're logged in. So it's going to show you this interface, and you can see it just has some information, like some tips to get started, and also you have the prompt here where you can type whatever you like. Now, one thing I want you to understand is that the reason why Gemini is able to be so helpful is that it comes with certain tools. And the way to know what tools are available is by using the /tools command. So you just type /tools and it's going to list the available tools. So let me do that. And now you can see what tools are available, right? You can see that there's a code-based investigator agent, edit, find files, Google search, read file, read folder, and a lot more. And what this means is that these are the tools that allow Gemini CLI to be able to gather context, right? So for example, if you say, Gemini, I need you to explain what's going on in this code base. How is it going to do that? It's going to call its read folder command or its read folder tool. It's going to look at what files are available. Then it's going to call the read file tool, and it's going to see what the contents of those files are. And that's how it's able to produce a useful response. And if it needs to search the web for some information, it's going to use its Google search tool. So this is how Gemini CLI is able to, perform its duties essentially. And just a basic example, you can type, for example, just a generic search request, like who is the world's richest man, for example. And you see that it's going to use Google search to get the result. And when you click enter, then it loads, and shortly we should see a result. But you can see that it's using its Google search tool. It has a bunch of tools, but it intelligently knows that you're asking for something that it needs to browse the web for, right? You cannot surface that information locally. And you see that right here, that it's using the Google search tool, searching the web, and once it gets the results, it gives you the response. That's it. At the current time, Elon Musk is the world's richest man. Now, I'm just using this as an example. This has nothing to do with coding. So let's go to something more interesting. So let's talk about some of the use cases for Gemini CLI, right? So before you can even use it, right? Like you see, it's just a blank screen. So I want to show you some of the things you can actually do with it, right? What value does it offer? Right now, or in the last slide, I just showed a simple demonstration of using it to search Google, surface information from the web. But you can already do that with your, ChatGPT and Gemini web interface. So let's look at some specific use cases for Gemini CLI when it comes to coding. And one of the basic way to get started, like I said earlier, is by understanding an unfamiliar code base, right? So this is basically the easiest way to get started, because you don't need anything. You just need to have the Gemini CLI installed, and you need to have a code base that you're trying to understand. And in the past, when you are onboarded to a new project, I don't know if anyone has had the experience where you just joined a team, or maybe you are freelancing and somebody said, hey, I have a developer, he's disappointing me, can you take over this project? And you don't really know what the other developer has been doing, right? It's not like you guys were collaborating. So he obviously was coding in a certain way, using the tools he knew. And, it takes a long time normally to understand what the guy did or what the person did, and to be able to now start building on top of that, right? So, and if you don't have the developer to ask questions, you are basically stuck because you have to read the code. Usually there's no documentation, so you have to test things out, and all that takes a long time. But with Gemini, you can speed up that workflow by just asking some basic questions about the code. Now, what are some of the questions you can ask? For example, you can ask what a piece of code does, right? What the function is doing, how the function is being called, or what a file is doing, right? What does this file actually do? Or how are these components working together? Another thing you can ask is, let's say you want to make a change, right? Let's say you just want to change something about, maybe you want to change some functionality of the product or the software you are working on. But like I said, it's not familiar to you. You don't even know where to make that change. You can ask the Gemini CLI to read the code for you, read the entire code base, and tell you where to make that change. And later on, you will also see that Gemini can not just tell you where to make the change, it can also make the change for you. But we'll get to that. Another thing you can do is to get a big picture view of how the project fits together, right? So a project sometimes can contain hundreds of files, if it's a very complex project, and you want to know how everything comes together. You can just ask Gemini to summarize it for you, like how do all these files work? What does this folder do? How is the project organized? And so much more. So you can do a lot. And I'm going to show an example of that right now with the demo. And this demo is just going to be a very simple one. I'm going to use Gemini to ask some questions about a to-do list application. Now, if you want to follow along, you can go to this link, and this link is where the app is. So you can go to this GitHub link and then you download it onto your computer. So I already have it on my computer, so I'm just going to switch to the terminal now. Okay, so I'm on the to-do list project, and you see that it's just a small project, right? There's nothing special here. It's just some HTML, some CSS, and some JavaScript. And I'm actually going to open this in the browser so you see what it looks like. Okay, so this is what that to-do list app looks like. It's a very simple application where you can add, your to-do list items. So, for example, let's say for today, let's say I want to, well, of course, I want to learn about the Gemini CLI. You can add that. And I can also check it off. Let's say I've learned about it. I can check it like this, and I can delete it. So that's basically the functionality of the to-do list app. So it's a very simple app, but it's going to serve to demonstrate everything I'll be talking about. So let's go back to Gemini. So once you've downloaded the app, this is the code base. I've shown you the functionality of the app, but you are not the one who builds the app. So it's not familiar to you. You might not know how it was built. Was it React that was used to build it? Was it Vue.js, or was it just regular JavaScript? You don't even know. You don't know what are the technologies that were involved in building that project. So let's say, just imagine that somebody was building the app for me, right? I now hired you as, maybe the person was disappointing me, he was not serious. I now hired you to take over the project. What will be the first thing you need to do? You first need to understand what the other developer is doing first. That's what I mean by understanding an unfamiliar code base. Because you need to understand what the other developer is doing before you can now effect new changes. So the way you do that with Gemini, first of all, you need to navigate to the directory that you want on, the directory of the application. So right now I'm in the to-do app directory, and what you can do, actually let me close this out. So you see that I'm in the to-do app directory, right? And then you just open Gemini there once again. Just make sure you are already in that directory. Because like I said, Gemini needs to read the files. It needs to read the folders before you can understand what it needs to do. So one of the questions we can ask about from Gemini is what technologies were actually used to build the project. So let's go right ahead and ask that question. To save time, I'm just going to copy and paste the question. So, what are the main technologies and libraries used for this project? And when you press enter, you will see that Gemini is going to use its tools to read the files. You can see it using the read file tool. It's reading the package.json first, and then it's reading the index.html, right? And then it's going to read the other files. It's going to read the JavaScript file. It's going to read the CSS file, just to know what tool, what technologies are used. How it is giving an answer that it primarily uses what? HTML5, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript, and that there are no external JavaScript libraries in use. So you can already know that, okay, I'm not dealing with React here, I'm not dealing with Vue, I'm not dealing with jQuery, I'm just dealing with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And another question you can ask is, what is the main functionality of the project, right? You want to know the functionality. So that's another thing you can ask, and we're just going to do that now. So, and it's going to explain to you, because it has read the files already. I can just ask a follow-up question, right? What's the functionality? I don't need to tell it, oh, this is a to-do app or anything. I can just ask the question, and now we can see that from its analysis, it says this is a to-do list application with the following core features, which is it can add to-dos, it can mark to-dos as completed, and it can delete to-dos, which is exactly what I demonstrated earlier. So that's fantastic, but we need more information. We need to know how the application actually works. What functions are being called to make that functionality happen? And one question we can ask is for it to trace the step-by-step execution of the code when you hit enter on the form. So when you type a to-do and you hit enter, you want to know what functions are being called. So you can ask a question that looks like this. Trace the step-by-step execution flow of what happens when the user hits enter on the form. And once you do that, again, it's going to analyze the code and it's going to give a result. Let's just wait a little bit. So you can see this is a very good high-level summary of what the code is doing. you can see it produces a lot more output, right? It says that, hey, when the submit event is triggered, the event listener is called and the input is retrieved, and then there's a validation that occurs, which checks if the trim string or the input text is not empty, right? And after that, this add to do is called, and it does a bunch of things, and after that, the DOM is rendered, and you get your result. So basically, now you can see what the code is doing. We've not opened our editor at all to even check the code ourselves. But from these few questions, you at least now start having an idea that, okay, when you add a to-do, it's calling this add to-do function. So if I want to do something related to, maybe I want to change it, something in that process, I know where exactly I need to look. I don't need to start reading the code from scratch. So this is what Gemini CLI can do for you. And a few tips when you are prompting your code. Let me share the slides again. So a few tips when you are prompting an unfamiliar code base. It's very important for you to start with that, right? Because it's just a way for you to get comfortable with using CLI, right? Now we've not done anything special, we're just prompting. The only thing is that because the CLI has full access to the directory, it's able to give us very useful answers. And the second tip is you need, sometimes Gemini or any of these tools, if you give them a very complex question, they might not get it the first time. So you need to practice a lot to see where you can break out the prompt a little bit. Because sometimes you can ask it a complex question, it doesn't really give you a good result. So the only way you can develop an intuition for the right type of prompt to use is through practice. And then another thing you need to do is ask why questions. And what I mean by that is, it's not enough to just know what the code is doing. Sometimes you need to know why, right? Because when you are coding, you are making decisions all the time. You are choosing one option over another. And sometimes you want to know why the previous person decided to make a certain decision. And Gemini can also do that, especially if it has access to the Git history. It's able to do that just fine. So let's talk about the next use case real quick, which is planning and brainstorming, right? So we've talked about understanding. We now want to talk about how you plan your changes. So I don't think if you want to write some code, before you write the code, you need to know what you are doing, right? You need to know the specifications. You need to know exactly what you're implementing, right? And Gemini can also help you with that. So you can ask it for ideas. You can ask it how to build it, how hard is it, right? Is it super hard? Is it going to take you 5 minutes? Or is it going to take you the whole day? So these are just to help you plan and prioritize the features you're going to be implementing. And one way to do that, real quick, let me share the terminal again. So one way to do that, for example, with this project, like I said, we are kind of assuming that the previous developer abandoned the project and the app is actually not complete. So we can ask Gemini for some ideas on what are the missing functionality in this to-do list application that we can implement. So let's do that real quick. And also this helps because if you are contributing to open source projects, for example, sometimes you don't even know where to start because the project is so big and a lot of people are really contributing to it. So you can use Gemini to ask for ideas like, hey, where can I or what functionality can I implement in this project? And that can give you a big help with getting started. So I'm just going to ask Gemini a question now about what functionality does it think we are missing in this to-do list application? So the question is very simple. Okay. The question is very simple. It is, what are the missing functionality in this project? Right? And when I click enter now, it's going to analyze the project because it knows it's a to-do list app. It's going to, research what are the common functionality in to-do list applications, and then it's going to present a result. So, for example, it says that the project provides basic to-do functionality, but it is missing several common features like persistence. And what it means by that is when you reload the page, your to-dos disappear, right? There's no persistence. Also, you cannot edit to-dos. If you make a mistake while adding a to-do item, you cannot edit it. You have to delete it first and then add it. You cannot filter, you cannot clear completed tasks, and you cannot change the ordering. So these are just some ideas. Some of which may not be relevant depending on the project you're building, right? So it's just, you're just asking for ideas, and you have to pick and choose which ones are relevant to you and which ones are not important. You understand? You're still the one that's going to make that decision, but you can see how Gemini can help you look for ideas. Not just about features to implement, but also about how to improve your code base. So for example, if your code is slow, maybe people are complaining that your code is slow or the program you're building is slow. You can ask it for ideas that, how can I improve the speed of my program? And sometimes it can provide very useful suggestions. So the next thing is editing code. So we've talked about how you can understand the code base. We've also talked about how you can get ideas, right? The next thing is how you can actually implement those ideas. And what you just need to know is that you need to focus on one specific feature, right? You need to know exactly, for example, let's say I like this idea about data persistence. You mentioned that we can save either to the browser's local storage or to a database, right? But let's say I don't want to go through the trouble of setting up a database. I can just ask it to help me implement the local storage feature. And that's actually what we're going to do next. So we're going to ask the CLI, Gemini, to now edit the code, right? So we now understand the code. We've asked for ideas on what to do. We have some ideas. Now we want to start implementing the features. But you don't just say, okay, implement all the features, right? It's not the best way to go about it. The best way is to pick a feature you want to implement, and then implement it. Then you go to the next feature. That way, you reduce the chances or you increase the chances that the tool is able to work correctly, right? Because when you give it too much to do, just like human beings, if you give a human too many things to do, it starts to fail, right? Same thing with CLI. You have to make it focus on one thing, get it perfectly right, and then move on to the next thing. So the next thing we're going to do now is, so let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to share the browser again, and so this is the to-do list app. And when I add a to-do, say, learn to code, right? When I refresh the page like this, everything disappears, right? So now what we want to ask the AI model to do for us is save the to-do list app, to-do list items to the browser's local storage, so that when you refresh the page, it persists, right? You don't have to add it again every time. So that's what we want to do. Okay, so the prompt we need to use is, We're just going to ask the CLI here. So I'm going to say implement data persistence through local storage. I'm giving it an instruction that it should actually write code for me, which is pretty insane if you think about it. Now it's going to load, right? And it's going to think about how it can implement that feature, right? We're not writing the code ourselves. We're asking the AI model to do it for us. And it can do that. You can see what it's doing. It's reading the file, and then it reads the file. It says, okay, I need to edit the JavaScript file. It reads the index.js file. It's now editing it. And you can see these lines in green are the lines it's adding, right? And you can see it's using the local storage API to implement this change. Now, the good thing is that before you implement a change, you should read it first to confirm that it's actually correct. Because sometimes, not all the time, it can be wrong, right? So you have to read it to know that it's correct. Now that you can see the change, you can either choose to apply it. You can see the prompt below where you can either choose to allow it or allow always. I recommend just using the first option most of the time. And if maybe it's wrong or it's not going the right direction, so you can click escape on your keyboard to cancel that change. So in this case, I can see that it's doing well, so I'm going to click yes. So once I click yes, it actually edits the file. Once it does that, let's see if there's any other change it needs to make. And then it makes another change, right? And this change basically, when you reload the page, it retrieves the items from local storage, then renders it in the browser. So this is how it works. And I'm also going to click yes to accept that change. And now it's implemented it. So just that few lines of code, it has implemented that functionality for us. And now when I go to the browser, I'm going to share that for now. So I'm going to refresh it to the new page. So I'm going to share that. And now, so I'm going to refresh it so that the new changes take effect. When I type learn to code once again, and I press enter, that's a mistake. Okay. Learn to code. And I press, oh, come on. Okay. Okay. So when I refresh the page now, and I click learn code, I type learn code rather, it enters it, and then I can refresh it, and you can see that it persists, right? I'm refreshing it, but it's able to persist now. It no longer clears like before. So that's basically one of the functionality we've been able to add using the Gemini CLI, right? We are able to now add functionality quite easily. I didn't write any code. I just prompted the model. I didn't have to copy and paste code, right? The only thing I did was I told it, hey, give me some ideas on what I can implement. And once I did that, I asked it to implement a specific feature, and it implemented it perfectly, right? So you can also add other features. Let's say you wanted the ability to edit code. Let's do that one real quick. So now I cannot edit it. I can only delete and check. I want to be able to edit it. So let's see that one real quick. I'm going to tell it to. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so I'm now going to say that it should implement the ability to edit a to-do item. I made a typo there, but it's going to understand. So it's going to do the same thing. It's going to think about how it's going to implement it based on our existing code base, and then it's going to read the file, and then it's going to tell you what it needs to do. And now I'm going to just accept this. But one thing you should note actually is that sometimes the code can be wrong, so you have to actually read through it. And now it's going to add a bunch of code. And let me just read this. So what it's doing is adding an event lister for double click. And if it matches the text, it's going to edit it. And it's going to do a bunch of things here. And if you press escape, it's going to cancel the edit. But if you press enter, it saves the edit. Okay, so I'm going to click enter now. And it's going to continue implementing it. Now, this is a very simple feature, right? But sometimes, if it's a very complex feature, you might not get it right, and you have to break the steps down further. So this time, it adds a bit of code, just in some lines. But in some cases, some features you have to edit multiple files. So you just need to know how to break things down even further as necessary. So now let's see if it actually worked. So I'm going to share my screen again. So let's see if we can now edit. So our functionality of before is still working. Can we edit it now? Yes, we can. We can edit. I'm going to say learn to, I don't know, what do you want to learn to do? Learn to cook. Okay. Now, when I type learn to cook, I've changed it from learn to code to learn to cook. And I'm able to implement that functionality without writing any code by myself. All I needed to do was ask the AI model to write for me, read the code, make sure that it's correct, and accept it. That's all. And you can continue doing that and implementing features and making progress in whatever project you're working on. So, briefly, let me just go over some tips that you need to keep in mind when using the Gemini CLI. So some brief tips for agentic coding. First of all, always read the code before you save it, right? Gemini, like I said, it doesn't always produce perfect code, so you need to read it. Then another thing is you need to test it, of course, right? When you make a change, you test it first. And make sure you understand the code that it's producing. If you don't understand the code, you can ask a follow-up question that, hey, I don't understand this code, explain it to me, and it's going to do that. And then once you've made the change, make sure that you save it, you commit to Git, right? So normally what I'm supposed to do is, once I've implemented that persistent feature, I'll commit my code, and then after that, I now implement the next feature. Because, like I said, sometimes the AI model can get confused and get some things wrong, and you want to go back to the last working state. So, committing your code is what is going to help you do that. So, where to go from here? I've only covered basically a tip of the iceberg with what Gemini can do. You can do so much more than what I've just covered. But one thing I want you to do today is to make sure you install Gemini CLI on your computer, so that you can experiment with it, because that's what's going to give you the momentum. And then you can just build something small with it, right? I don't know whatever project you're working on already, just try it out on that project, or you can download the project online and just try to understand it and follow along, similar to how I've done here. And you can also visit the Gemini CLI to learn more, right? Which is very important. Now, one thing to keep in mind with all these new AI tools is that the goal is not for AI to replace you, it's to complement you in your work, right? It's to make things easier for you, right? So it's just to remove some of the roadblocks, right? And make things easier for you, make it easier for you to understand the code and implement features very quickly compared to before when these tools were not available. So that's it for my talk today. Thank you very much.